It was exactly 8:02 p.m. when I stepped onto my porch, and that's when the first flashlight hit my chest. "You're in violation," a voice barked from across the yard. I blinked, confused. Violation of what? It wasn't a curfew set by the city or the state. It was a memo from the damn HOA, shoved into my mailbox that morning, warning residents not to be outside past 8 p.m. for the comfort of civic guests. No legal citation, no names. Just an implied threat wrapped in bureaucracy. I live on Ashwood Bend, technically just outside the Ironcrest Heights HOA boundary. My property isn't governed by them. I've never paid their dues, and I sure as hell never agreed to their ridiculous rules. But that night, they decided to enforce them anyway. Two men, no uniforms, no badges, emerged from the shadows, like I was trespassing on my own lawn. One grabbed my arm. The other whispered, "You were warned." That's when I realized this wasn't about policy. It was personal, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but because my blood was still boiling from the encounter. I sat at my kitchen table, boots still on, flannel jacket unbuttoned, watching the footage on a loop from the security cams I'd set up around the perimeter. Every frame was sharp: the approach, the ambush, the scuffle. Clear faces, no disguises. These weren't pranksters or neighborhood busybodies. They were professionals. Or at least they were pretending to be. The next morning, I called an old friend, Sophia Reyes. We used to run patrols together, back when I worked homicide in Phoenix. She became a criminal defense attorney after leaving the force, mostly to help guys like me who'd had enough of bureaucracy and BS. She picked up after the second ring. "Ethan, what the hell did you get yourself into?" I told her everything. The letter, the men, the fight, the recording. She didn't even hesitate. "Send me the footage. I'll start compiling documentation. But listen, this isn't just HOA nonsense anymore. They crossed into criminal territory. Be methodical. Don't go cowboy on me." I promised her I'd stay calm, but in truth, calm was already in the rearview. My neighborhood Sycamore Ridge was supposed to be quiet. Retired teachers, firefighters, a few young couples trying to pretend suburbia wasn't a slow death sentence. I liked it because it had character: old trees, mismatched fences, kids drawing chalk monsters on the sidewalk. But the Ironcrest Heights HOA hated that. They wanted control, uniform lawns, weekly flyers, and no one questioning their self-appointed power. Thing is, I'd never signed their agreement. My house predates the HOA's founding by nearly a decade. But that didn't stop them from pushing violation notices, passive-aggressive letters, suggestions for how to repaint my garage to match community tones. I ignored them all. My property wasn't theirs. But that made me a problem. That night was a test. They wanted to see if I'd fold. Instead, they triggered something else entirely. By noon, I'd compiled a full report, timestamps, GPS metadata from the camera system, and a printout of the letter, still anonymous, still vague, but undeniably threatening. I even circled the phrase "hostile behavior" in red Sharpie and jotted down the legal implications. Then I started digging. First stop, the county property records website. It took me less than 10 minutes to pull up the HOA's listed boundaries. My lot was clearly outside of it. But something strange showed up: a proposed amendment, filed last year, expanding jurisdiction to include 3 nearby properties, mine included. Only problem, it was marked approved. I never signed anything. And legally, expansion requires signed consent from the affected property owners. Which meant either someone had made a mistake or they'd forged my name. I called Sophia again. She swore. "Send me the document," she said. "If your name's on it, we've got felony-level forgery on our hands." While she started prepping her legal grenades, I paid a visit to City Hall. The clerk behind the desk, a tired woman with a Diet Coke addiction and a voice like sandpaper, was surprisingly helpful. I asked if I could view the original annexation file. She clicked through a few tabs on her terminal, then turned the screen toward me. There, it was a scanned form supposedly bearing my signature, blocky all caps, no witness line. And the address listed was one I hadn't used in 5 years. "That's not mine," I muttered. She gave me a knowing look. Wouldn't be the first time that HOA pulled something shady. You want a copy? I nodded, email and hard copy. As I walked out, the pieces started to connect poorly planned but deliberate moves. They were trying to corner me into compliance. And if I pushed back, they had muscle on standby to intimidate me into submission. But now I had evidence. And a plan. Back at home, I installed 2 additional cameras, one angled to capture anyone approaching from the East Alley, and another disguised in a fake birdhouse, giving me a top-down view of the trash bin area. I swapped out all the SD cards, upgraded my cloud backups, and rigged a discreet motion-triggered floodlight near the gate. I wasn't afraid of a second encounter. I was counting on it. Around dusk, I sat in my garage, a cold beer in hand, and the shop door cracked open. I watched as a black SUV rolled slowly past my driveway, same make and model I'd seen in the footage from the night before. They were watching me. That was fine. Let them. Then the real surprise came. At 9:13 p.m., someone knocked on my side gate, 3 sharp raps evenly spaced. Not the front door, not the usual neighborly approach. I stood hand instinctively going to the flashlight on my belt and walked outside. It was Charles, my neighbor from 3 doors down. Former city planner, retired now. Quiet guy. Liked jazz records and crossword puzzles. He looked uncomfortable. Ethan, he said, eyes scanning the street behind him. I need to tell you something. I nodded, ushered him inside. Over a mug of coffee, he laid it out. 2 nights ago, during a closed HOA meeting he'd attended, because he was still technically on the advisory committee, Karen Holt, the HOA president, had made a comment. If he doesn't comply, this time, she said, we'll make sure he does. One way or another. It wasn't vague, it wasn't rhetorical. And worse, everyone in the room laughed. Charles, God bless him, had recorded the whole thing. Old habit, he said, handing me a flash drive. From my city days. Always good to have receipts. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was damning. You could hear Karen's voice crisp and snide, laying out what she called a containment strategy. The phrase "remind him who's in charge" made my skin crawl. I uploaded the file, tagged it, and stored it alongside the footage from the night before. Then I texted Sophia, "We've got audio. Premeditation confirmed." She responded with a single line, "This just went federal." And just like that, what started as a bogus curfew notice turned into a civil liberties case. 2 days after the curfew incident, I was in the middle of tightening bolts on a busted carburetor when my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera feed motion detected, rear alley gate. I glanced up at the monitor. A man in dark clothing hoodie up no visible ID was crouched near my trash bins. It was broad daylight, 2:37 p.m., bold as hell. I hit record and zoomed in. He reached into his coat and placed a clear plastic bag into the bin. Then, like it was nothing, he strolled off down the alley whistling. I didn't touch the bin. I didn't even get close. Instead, I walked inside, called the non-emergency police line, and explained I believed someone may have just planted illegal materials on my property. The officer arrived 20 minutes later, young, polite, with a name tag that read Barkley. I offered him gloves and showed him the footage. He reviewed it twice, then opened the bin. Inside a Ziploc bag filled with white powder, a switchblade and a rolled wad of cash clearly staged to look like a drug stash. Barkley exhaled slowly. "This looks planted." "No kidding," I said. "And I've got 3 angles of video to prove it." He radioed it in, took statements, and requested forensics. I handed him backup footage on a USB drive. Then I called Sophia. "They just tried to frame me," I said flatly. She didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She just said, "Good. That means they're scared. Now we push harder." By that evening, she'd filed a formal criminal complaint with the county DA, citing attempted evidence tampering and conspiracy. The HOA had crossed yet another line, this time into felony charges. But the story wasn't done unraveling. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from a man identifying himself as Deputy Director Lennox, apparently from the mayor's office. He sounded polished, too polished. Said he was reaching out to understand the situation and promote calm dialogue between neighbors and governing bodies. Then he said, "We'd appreciate your patience and discretion while internal reviews are underway." Translation, don't go public. So I went public. I posted a redacted version of the footage to my YouTube channel, titled Caught on Camera HOA Tries to Frame Me with Fake Drugs. Within 24 hours, it had over 150,000 views. By the weekend, it passed 300,000. Comments poured in from across the country, lawyers, ex-HOA members, even a retired judge who called the video an open and shut example of domestic intimidation gone wrong. Karen Holt, president of the Ironcrest Heights HOA, did not take it well. That Saturday evening, just as the sun dipped low behind the hills, a black Escalade pulled up across the street. Out stepped Karen heels clicking against the asphalt sunglasses, on lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. She wasn't alone. 2 board members flanked her, both in matching navy polos, clipboards in hand, like some parody of a suburban SWAT team. She didn't approach my door. Instead, she stood at the edge of my driveway and shouted, "Ethan, we need to talk." I stepped out calmly. "About the attempted drug frame-up or the forged documents, you'll have to be more specific." Her jaw twitched. "This circus you're creating is damaging the community." "You mean exposing criminal activity," I said. "Yeah, I can see how that's inconvenient for you." She motioned to one of the men who handed me a letter. No envelope, just folded paper with the HOA letterhead printed in gold. The text was absurd. Cease and desist. Defamation. Unauthorized tenant occupancy. HOA Code 4.3 violation. I laughed. "I'm not under your jurisdiction. This is a joke." "It won't be if we escalate," Karen snapped. "Oh, you mean escalate beyond curfews and hired muscle?" "You're already there, Karen." She turned on her heel and left, fuming. The next night it happened again. At 3:12 a.m., my perimeter alert pinged. This time there were 2 individuals. One crouched near the side gate. The other remained near the bins. I watched in real time as one of them pulled a small black pouch from his jacket and tucked it beneath a shrub near my fence. Then they fled, quick, quiet, organized. I waited until dawn before checking the spot. Inside the pouch, a utility knife, a sealed prescription bottle with no label, and a handful of cash wrapped in blue electrical tape. It was almost cartoonish, like a low-budget prop from a crime drama. But again, if I hadn't had cameras, it would have looked damning. This time, I didn't just call the cops. I called a local reporter I knew from my time on the force. Her name was Aria Grant. Sharp, thorough, hated bullies. She met me that afternoon, reviewed the footage, and promised to run the story, with names, timestamps, and screenshots. The piece dropped 48 hours later on the front page of the local news site. Homeowner targeted HOA, linked to multiple late-night evidence plants. By now, Karen's carefully curated suburban empire was cracking like dry paint. But the best was yet to come. That Thursday evening, Greg Delaney, one of the HOA board members I'd seen skulking behind Karen, showed up at my door. He looked pale, sweating through his polo hands, shaking slightly as he held out a flash drive. "I don't want to go down with them," he said. Inside that drive gold. Meeting minutes, audio files, internal emails between board members, and one chilling memo from Karen, titled Dealing with Resistance. In it, she referred to me as the agitator and outlined a multi-step plan. 1. Apply community pressure. 2. Discredit with rumor. 3. Use non-legal methods if necessary. One voice memo caught her mid-meeting. "We don't need police, we need results. If he wants a fight, we'll give him one. Just keep the optics clean." Sophia nearly screamed when I forwarded her the files. "We've got them. This isn't just conspiracy, it's racketeering-level coordination." By the end of the week, we had enough evidence to support charges for conspiracy to intimidate, attempted evidence tampering, unlawful surveillance, forgery, harassment, and it was only Friday. Until then, everything had been personal. It was my house, my gate, my cameras, my war. But that changed the moment my neighbor Paula, retired, nurse sweetest woman on the block, knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. "They came to my house, Ethan," she said, voice trembling. "Told me I needed to sign a complaint about you, or risk being cited for unauthorized yard furniture." I stared at her, stunned. "What did you say?" She pulled a folded form from her purse. "I told them to get off my porch. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. The HOA wasn't trying to silence one person. They were trying to dominate the entire street through fear threats and legal smokescreens. I wasn't the only target, I was just the first one dumb enough to fight back. Later that day, I made a dozen calls to neighbors I'd barely spoken to before. Some answered with hesitation, some didn't at all, but three of them, Paula Reggie, a retired firefighter, and Lily, a single mum who worked nights, agreed to meet me in my garage that evening. I had a whiteboard, a pile of printed evidence, and a laptop streaming the videos. I'm not here to start a war, I told them, but I'm not going to stand down while a handful of people try to run this place like a private dictatorship. Lily was the first to nod. They fined me $200 for having my trash bins out 30 minutes early, she said. And when I asked where that money went, they told me it was reinvestment. Whatever that means. Reggie leaned forward. They threatened to tow my truck from my own driveway. I'm not even in their jurisdiction. We started connecting dots. Each of us had a piece of the puzzle: bizarre letters, threats, sudden violations, fake curfews, and now attempted setups. I shared what I had, including Greg's flash drive and the audio files. By the time we were done, the four of us sat in stunned silence. Paula broke it with a whisper. They've been planning this for months. I nodded. And we've been giving them the benefit of the doubt. That ends tonight. That week we went full operation. Sophia helped me draft a neighborhood affidavit, simple, non-confrontational, but legally binding. Anyone who had experienced threats, false violations, or suspicious visits could fill it out. We printed 200 copies, folded them into manila envelopes, and dropped them on every porch in Sycamore Ridge. No campaign slogans, no petitions, just truth. Within 48 hours, we had over 60 signed responses. Then came the stories. A widower at the end of the block said Karen threatened to report him for disturbing the peace because his porch wind chimes were too loud. A high school teacher got a violation for having a pride flag on her window. One family received a notice accusing their child of unauthorized recreational activity for riding a scooter near the park. This wasn't mismanagement, it was suppression. So I went back to Aria, the journalist. This time, we gave her everything. She ran a long-form investigative piece titled Power, Fear, and HOA Abuse Inside a Suburban Battle for Freedom. The article hit harder than I expected. Regional news picked it up. Legal blogs shared it. People who had never even heard of Sycamore Ridge began posting their own HOA horror stories in the comments. Sophia emailed me the morning after the story dropped. Subject line: They poked the bear. Body civil liberties attorneys are calling me. They want in. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Not bad, just unexpected. I was at the local grocery store buying dog treats for Buddy, my rescue lab, when a woman tapped me on the shoulder. "You're Ethan, right?" I turned. She looked nervous, but not hostile. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "We don't talk much. I live across the Greenbelt. But I've been watching everything, and you gave us hope." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and said, "We're just getting started." That night, for the first time in months, I sat in the backyard with a drink and watched the street. Not for intruders, not for threats, just watched. And what I saw surprised me. Kids riding bikes again, an older couple walking their dog, porch lights on, conversations drifting through the air. Something had shifted. People weren't hiding anymore. The silence was over. The fear was dying. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about protecting my house. It was about reclaiming the neighborhood from a regime that never had the right to control it in the first place. We weren't victims anymore. We were witnesses. We were fighters. And together we were going to burn their little HOA empire to the ground with evidence, with law, and with the truth. We didn't wait for a miracle. We built our own. With the flood of complaints, affidavits, and digital evidence in hand, Sophia filed a formal petition for injunctive relief against the Ironcrest Heights HOA, naming Karen Holt and 3 other board members as respondents. The goal: freeze their authority, stop the harassment, and force external oversight. The county court moved faster than anyone expected. Maybe it was the public pressure. Maybe it was the stack of legal filings that looked more like a corruption case than a neighborhood dispute. Or maybe the judge had seen one too many HOAs go rogue. Whatever the reason, a hearing was set within 7 days. But before that hearing even happened, something remarkable unfolded. The momentum shifted. For months, the HOA had controlled the narrative with carefully phrased newsletters, veiled threats, and legal ambiguity. But now we were telling the story and people were listening. Arya's article went viral. National outlets picked it up. HOA horror stories started trending on social media under the hashtag #HOA overreach. Within 72 hours, I had producers from 3 cable networks in my inbox. But that wasn't the opportunity we cared about most. That came in the form of a letter, not a fake HOA memo, a real certified document from the State Department of Consumer Affairs. The agency had launched a formal investigation into Ironcrest Heights for unlicensed security operations, suspected forgery misuse of community funds, and civil rights violations. That same day, I received a knock at the door. It wasn't another threat, it was Greg again, the board member who'd flipped. He looked lighter, like someone who'd finally stepped out from under a weight he never should have carried. "I've got more," he said, handing over a second flash drive. This one was worse than the first. It contained internal emails outlining payments made to a Nevada-based shell company, ostensibly for consulting services. The timestamps matched the week I'd been assaulted in my yard. The names generic. The address, a strip mall P.O. box. Sophia connected the dots in a heartbeat. This wasn't just intimidation, she said. This was a criminal conspiracy to use illegal force for territorial control. We're past HOA politics now. This is organized abuse of power. And then came the best part. We uncovered a parcel of land, Lot 17B, listed as reserved community commons on HOA maps. But the ownership was murky. Turns out the LLC that held the deed went bankrupt mid-year. No one claimed it. No one noticed. Except me. I bought it. Quietly. Legally. No press. Just a single transfer at the county clerk's office. The price under $6,000. Why? Because that plot was the linchpin for the HOA's expansion plan. Without it, they couldn't redraw their jurisdiction map. Couldn't claim my home. Couldn't justify future assessments. I didn't just throw a wrench into their scheme, I dismantled the whole gearbox. The following weekend, I attended a community meeting, not run by the HOA, but by a temporary volunteer council, hastily assembled after Sophia's petition forced the suspension of Karen's authority. It was held in a church basement full of folding chairs, lemonade, and cautious optimism. I sat in the back, watched neighbors I barely knew stand up and speak with newfound courage. One after another, they told stories of harassment pressure threats. And then they looked at me, not like I was some lone fighter, but like I was one of them. When the floor opened for motions, I raised my hand. As the new legal owner of Lot 17B, I said, I move that the property be permanently removed from any future HOA jurisdiction and designated as a public use, non-governed green space. No dues, no curfews, no authority. Silence, then applause. The vote passed unanimously. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw real change. Not just revenge, not just survival, but an opportunity for healing. People started showing up to my place, with questions, ideas, baked goods. Someone offered to plant sunflowers on the new green space. Another wanted to build a community bench. HOA officers used to patrol with clipboards. Now the only thing being enforced was neighborliness. I still had cameras, I still locked my gate, but the tension was gone. Karen, she stopped showing up. Rumor had it she'd hired a crisis manager. Her house went on the market a week later. No farewell, no apology. Just a for sale sign and silence. By mid-month, Sophia was working directly with state officials to draft a formal complaint to dissolve the HOA entirely. It was bold, it was unprecedented, but it was happening, and we weren't alone. Other neighborhoods started reaching out, asking how we did it, requesting templates, offering support. One retired judge even volunteered to help draft future bylaw alternatives for communities who wanted governance without tyranny. I realized something as I walked the edge of my newly purchased lot one evening, coffee in hand, sun dipping low behind the hills. This wasn't just a win. It was a reset, a reminder that local power unchecked can become as dangerous as any government overreach. But it also proved something more powerful, that ordinary people, when armed with truth and united by purpose, can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of abuse and rebuild something better in its place. Before this war started, I was the guy who kept to himself, fixing motorcycles in my garage, skipping neighborhood barbecues, smiling politely, then disappearing behind a locked gate. My world was small by choice, controlled quiet and contained. That version of me wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in the storm that followed. I used to think strength meant handling everything alone. Don't ask for help, don't show weakness, don't get involved. It took a fraudulent HOA 2-stage drug drops and a community on the edge of collapse to show me how wrong I was. Now I was sitting on a bench I'd built with my own hands, right in the middle of the reclaimed green space I used to call Lot 17B. Kids were playing tag nearby. Paula was walking her dog. Reggie was planting new flowers near the old oak tree that had somehow survived all the chaos. And me, I was listening, learning, letting go of control. Because the truth was, I didn't win this fight alone. It was Charles and his flash drive. It was Lily and her quiet courage. It was Sophia who burned the legal playbook just to write a better one. It was every neighbor who dared say, no more. That's what changed me. I went from being someone who reacted to someone who led. Not loudly, not with ego, but with clarity. When the temporary volunteer council asked if I'd consider helping draft a new charter for Neighborhood Cooperation 1 without fines, curfews, or power-tripping presidents, I didn't hesitate. I'll help, I said, but only if we do it together. We did. It wasn't perfect. We disagreed. We argued. We debated the color of sidewalk murals for 30 minutes once. But no one shouted, no one threatened, and every vote was public counted and respected. We called it the Ridge Pact. Just 7 pages. No legalese, no ambiguity. It wasn't a homeowners association. It was a compact between people who wanted to live in peace. Looking back, I still remember the worst night of it all. The night I heard boots on gravel outside my window. The night I watched 2 shadows try to plant fake drugs and a knife near my trash bins. The night I didn't chase them, not because I was scared, but because I finally understood something. They weren't attacking me. They were trying to break me. And they failed. Because while they were busy scheming in the dark, we were building light. That's what growth looked like, not more armor, but more openness. I started having conversations on my porch. I started learning my neighbors' names. I even joined the local food drive, something I hadn't done since my rookie days on the force. Sophia joked once that I'd gone from grumpy ex-cop to neighborhood uncle. I didn't mind. I used to scoff at words like community and connection. Now I carved them into the bench behind my workshop. We even had a cookout 2 weeks after the last of the charges were filed against Karen and her inner circle. No speeches, no victory banners, just folding chairs, grilled burgers, and stories passed around like a bottle of sweet tea. We didn't talk about the curfew or the cameras or the lawsuits. We didn't need to. We talked about music, dogs. That one time Lily's kid tried to skateboard off Reggie's shed roof. We laughed, hard. And that more than anything told me the battle had truly shifted, not just against the HOA, but inside ourselves. We'd gone from silence to strength, from suspicion to solidarity, me most of all, because once upon a time I thought I didn't need anyone. Now I knew better. Now I knew that strength wasn't isolation, it was interdependence. It was trusting others. It was standing together when the storm came. And when spring finally arrived in Sycamore Ridge, it didn't just bring new flowers. It brought a new version of me. The trial didn't drag. It was swift, surgical, and cathartic. The courtroom was full neighbors and the front press and the back tension stacked to the ceiling. When Karen walked in, beige blazer trademark heels, sunglasses perched like armor, you could feel the chill. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. She wasn't powerful. She was cornered. The prosecution led with video grainy, but irrefutable. The assault, the evidence drops, the voice recordings, the forged signature. Then came Greg testifying with hands trembling but voice steady. His words were simple. I was told to follow orders. I didn't ask questions. I should have. The defense tried to pivot, claimed neighborhood confusion that security was contracted in good faith. They even floated the idea that I had exaggerated the threat for attention. But then Sophia stepped up. She didn't posture. She didn't roar. She just laid out the facts, calm, relentless, sharp. Timeline, intent, coordination, motive. And finally the chain of emails from Karen herself. The one that ended with, apply pressure. If he pushes back, escalate. If caught, deny. Silence fell like a gavel. By the third day, even the reporters weren't taking notes. They were just watching the downfall unfold in real time. The verdict came just before lunch on a Tuesday. Guilty. Karen Holt was stripped of her authority, fined and barred from holding any HOA office in the state. 2 board members faced lesser charges. One of the men who attacked me accepted a plea deal and cooperated. The other convicted, and me, I was awarded damages, not just financial, but moral. The judge cited gross abuse of private authority in violation of civil liberties. But honestly, the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was walking out of that courtroom and seeing my neighbors smiling, nodding, standing with me. We'd won, but even more importantly, we'd changed. That weekend, we held a community gathering, not a celebration, but a transition. It was at the green space, formerly Lot 17B, now dotted with benches, flowers, and a wooden sign I'd carved myself: private property, community-owned, no authority required. Underneath that, a smaller plaque read, "To those who stood their ground, so others wouldn't have to." People brought folding chairs, kids played, someone brought a guitar, Reggie grilled hot dogs, Lily passed out lemonade. I stood at the edge for a while watching it all, listening not for footsteps on gravel, not for threats, but for laughter, music, life. And I realized something I hadn't admitted until then. I wasn't just fighting for peace, I was learning how to live in it again. Karen moved out quietly. Her house sold to a retired couple who painted over her beige trim with a sky blue that made the whole block feel lighter. The HOA dissolved, replaced by an optional community forum with open meetings, clear rules, and no enforcement power. Just neighbors talking, disagreeing, building. The story went national. Interviews, podcasts, think pieces about HOA's power and what happens when one man refuses to back down. But I turned most of it down. I didn't need more attention. I just needed more weekends like that, one smoke from the grill, laughter in the air, no agenda but connection. Sophia did convince me to speak once at a small community law conference. My topic: when neighborhoods fight back, a blueprint for civil resistance. I told them the truth, that I didn't start this looking to be a leader. I started it because I was tired of being afraid in my own yard. That you don't need a badge to defend what's right. That cameras, truth, and community will outlast fear every time. And that if a HOA thinks it can declare curfews, plant evidence, or control the air you breathe, they've forgotten something crucial. The law still outranks their newsletter. When I stepped off stage, people clapped. But the real applause came weeks later when a letter arrived in my mailbox, not a threat, not a fine, but a note. From a neighborhood in Oregon. "Thanks to your story, we stood up, and we won." I taped it inside my garage, right above the tool rack, just below the wrench I named after Josh. What started as a ridiculous curfew notice ended in a courtroom and a revolution. Not because I was special, but because I refused to be silent. That's the real lesson here. Authority without accountability isn't leadership, it's control. And the moment we stop questioning it, we give it permission to grow unchecked. Standing up doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's installing a camera, calling a lawyer, asking your neighbor how they're doing. Every action matters when the system depends on your silence. For a long time, I thought strength meant isolation. But I've learned it's actually the willingness to connect, to trust, to defend not just your property, but your principles. In the end, truth is louder than fear. And a community united by purpose is more powerful than any organization hiding behind paper rules and polished signatures. So if you're ever pushed, pressured, or made to feel small in your own home, remember they only win if you give up. Stand your ground, ask questions, demand answers. You don't need to be loud, you just need to be clear. And above all, don't fight alone. If you're dealing with an aggressive HOA or local authority, start by documenting everything: letters, emails, photos, and especially video. Never confront alone. Involve neighbors. Share stories. Most abuses survive in silence. Consult a lawyer early, especially if you suspect forgery or harassment. Report intimidation to local authorities and file formal complaints with your city's housing department or state consumer affairs office. Install visible security cameras and backup footage to the cloud. Keep copies of property lines and HOA bylaws. Knowledge is leverage. Most importantly, build community. Talk to neighbors. Host a simple meeting. Sometimes just knowing you're not the only one makes all the difference. Because the real power doesn't live in policy, it lives in people willing to speak.